Hallo, dette Trond Vatne Tveiten, og dere hører på JoinPod, podcast nummer 9. Jeg skal nå faktisk føre over til engelsk, siden dette for et internasjonalt publikum. Hello, this is Tron, and it's podcast in the JoinPod series number 9. I usually do this podcast in Norwegian, but since, I try to get an international audience, I'll do it in English this time. This time we're going back to the United States, who now have a legalization movement going on like ever. And one person I'm going to talk to is a fellow Scandinavian, a man who's been living in the United States for 10 years, is Tim Morgen. Hello, Tim.
Hello, John. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
In 10 years' time, you've been living in the United States. What drove you over to the United States in the first place? Was it because of cannabis?
Nah, not completely. So I'm born and raised in Denmark. So yes, we are fellow Scandinavians. I married an American girl, and we decided to move to Colorado in 2012, the spring of 2012. And in the autumn of 2012, Colorado and the state of Washington both voted as the first states in the U.S. to whether or not to legalize the recreational, the adult use of marijuana or cannabis. So I was here about 6 months before it all kind of like started taking shape. That being said, and maybe we can get into that in a little bit bigger context, but Colorado had already legalized medical use of cannabis by 2008, 2009. So they already had a fairly well-established medical program by the time they decided to put it for a vote and put it to a vote in the way that in Colorado you have the ability to do initiatives, people-driven initiatives, where people will go out and collect signatures and force various issues on the ballot, the right of the people, basically, and that's what happened in 2012, both in Washington and Colorado, where volunteers, advocates for legalizing cannabis went out, collected the signatures, asked the voters, and they said yes, both here in Colorado and Washington back in 2012. And then it takes time. Then they needed to create the regulatory framework for cannabis, how to do it, how to grow it, how to distribute it, how to sell it. They spent all of 2013 creating the rule set for this in both Washington and Colorado. And by January 2014 was January 1st, 2014 is when we had the first legal recreational sales here in Colorado and in the state of Washington. I saw it. Like I've been here for the entire legalization period and then got involved in the cannabis industry back in 2015, and where I've been working with the various cannabis entities, companies here in Colorado primarily, working especially with local government, trying to figure out a good way to have new cities adopt regulatory frameworks for allowing sales and cultivation of cannabis. I didn't come because of weed, but I've pretty much like been part of it since the inception, at least of the recreational market.
But this is funny because you're a Dane, like in Scandinavia, like you look at cannabis as something horrible, like a gateway drug and going to destroy everything and so on. How, when you come back to Denmark, how do you present it to your family, like in the family dinners, like, I'm the weed business legally.
So I would. Thankfully, my family is fairly open-minded and progressive. So at least they haven't they haven't cut me off completely. But really the main reason why I decided to get into the cannabis industry and I decided to get passionate about legalization, both here in the States and globally, was my dad. He battled with cancer. And I was sitting here in Colorado and having being in a society where you had access to medical cannabis, I saw how people were getting relief, and they were, in some instances, actually helping them get rid of cancer. And it was extremely frustrating, and it broke my heart not being able to be able to give my dad the option to get that relief that we had available to us over here. So one of the reasons why I do this is of course because I've seen it. I've lived in a society where we have experienced a lot of benefits, not only personal. I've met a lot of patients, babies with seizures who cannot use conventional medicine but can use tinctures and can have a better quality of life. Seen cancer patients. I've seen people with severe PTSD who's grateful and thankful for what we do every day. And I know that what we do over here is the right thing, and I hope that we can be, and I hope, and I believe we are a beacon of inspiration for other countries and other states to stop the stigma about cannabis, which in many instances is a medicine for a lot of people, and for also just a recreational, very non-toxic, very compared to alcohol. Of course, it's not even close. Alcohol kills people every day. Cannabis does not. The amount of money, the amount of jobs that we've created here in Colorado and across the U.S., the additional revenue, avoiding people going to jail for something as silly as smoking a joint, all those things just seems right to me, and yeah, that's why I've done it for a long time by now.
But were you pro cannabis before you went to Colorado?
Definitely. Like I was thankful. Like I don't know how much Norway knows about it, or the common grade, but we have a place in Copenhagen called Christiania, which the old name of Oslo.
This podcast knows.
Okay, good. It's been a while since I've been there, and it's definitely not gotten better. But when I started coming on Christiania, it was really a free haven. It was extremely free and open and inviting and loving. And I really enjoyed seeing how they had this self-justice system about not allowing hard drugs. Just because you're pro cannabis does not necessarily mean that you're pro all drugs, because it's not the same thing. And I really enjoyed seeing. Of course, it also made me question, the ideals and the beliefs that is being fed to us through conventional media, all these propaganda stories that somebody knows someone or heard about one who had terrible experiences. But in reality, of course, it just made me see that this is not the devil's letters. It is not anything that makes people go crazy or makes them become sexual deviants or whatever else that people have been attributing to through history. And so I knew from the beginning, of course, that it was not a drug as such that was harmful to the community. That being said, I'm very proud of being part of the next step, and the next step from Christiania, where you don't know where you're smoking, where you don't know how it's been manufactured, how you don't know where it's from, to be able to be part of creating a real regulated market where medical patients can get clean products that has been overseen and regulated, and that they can get access to the same strains that helps them for whatever illnesses that they might have. That's a privilege, and of course it's completely different. But we truly believe that we work for the community and a lot of the money. I know for Scandinavian people, 25% VAT or sales tax is not a whole lot, but over here, and people buying cannabis in Colorado pays about 28% in sales tax, where normal sales tax might be 8% on various goods. So it also just helps create a lot of money for schools, for for infrastructure, for all kind of good things, that it's just a pleasure being part of. Where Christiania, of course, unfortunately, a lot of the revenue being generated there does not necessarily fall in the right pockets, if you understand. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I do. We have the two myths. The first myth is the gateway drug, because this is an argument being used all the time. Like, cannabis is the gateway drug.
Mm.
I can see nothing who proves that. The only thing people I know who had as a gateway drug were people who was arrested and put in jail and meet other criminals. Do you see that the legalization in the United States now have created more hardcore drug use?
Like, the short answer is, of course, no. There is no correlation between anybody. Just like we do not have a bunch of drug addicts in the streets. We don't. We have not seen any like significant. There has been some very politically driven reports stating that crime has been on the uprise in Colorado, and petty theft and all those kind of things. Everybody's driving around being high and all those things. For the most part, if anybody looks at independent studies where people have actually looked at it and they are funded by independent sources, it will show that there has been no increase in crime. There has been no increase in and actually there's been a decrease in hard substance abuse. And I think even more importantly, when we talk about legalization, it is also fact and proven that having a legalized, regulated market makes it harder for youth to smoke or consume cannabis. It makes less of them consume cannabis because we're able to talk about it. We're able to understand what kind of damage it can do to a undeveloped brain under the age of 18 or 16. And I think a lot of these myths, and of course this is anecdotally and what my own experience is from seeing how the black market works and operates. I think that the gateway drug comes from the fact that illegal sales of drugs, if it's created in hubs where you have access to all kind of drugs, cannabis, amphetamines, ecstasy, heroin, whatever that might be, then you have an access to it. It's in front of you. That might more lead to someone going down that path. You're not able to buy anything else than cannabis in stores. Everybody is checked to make sure that they're old enough. Everybody has made sure that they don't buy too much. And no, there is no evidence in Colorado or any other place that says anything about, and exactly the opposite, that it actually can help people who's facing heroin addictions, people who's having other kind of substance abuse, that in many instances they have been able to use cannabis to go the other way. So if it's a gateway drug in any way, it's for hardcore addicts to become clean. That's probably a gateway drug, and not the other way around. Right?
It's also the mental issues being like you can get cannabis psychosis, because that's an argument medical staffs in Norway often use.
So it is interesting, and I do it's interesting because I do, of course, follow the debate in Scandinavia and Denmark, where I'm from, where they're having a very failed medical test trial. Also looked a little at you and the way you guys are going to be reforming or are reforming like drug use as a whole. In America, the concept of cannabis psychosis is not something that anybody has ever really it's not a real thing, so nobody is talking about it. Like that is not like. If you have tendencies to schizophrenia, if you have all those kind of things, if you're prone to mental illness, there can be a lot of different reasons why you might somehow have that onset for various reasons: alcohol, cannabis, exercise. It can be a lot of different things. I think the psychosis thing, like, because I've never met anybody actually from a regulated market who became hospitalized, or I've talked to a lot of medical professionals. That's not how cannabis works. I think it's very important. Like, when we deal with these kind of myths, we have to understand how cannabis works. Before the 1990s, people were not really completely understanding what cannabis was doing to us when we would be digesting it or consuming it. We thought that it was some sort of psychedelic, some sort of conventional drug. What happened was, in the 1990s, an Italian doctor, whose name I'm sadly to have forgotten, realized that we, as human beings, as all mammals, have something called the endocannabinoid system. The endocannabinoid system is in our brain, and it is across our body. We call them CB1 and CB2 receptors. It is basically just like we have lymph glands and other things, a network across our body that gets stimulated through the absorption of cannabinoids. Cannabinoids is THC. That is the bad brother, the one that gets you relaxed and makes you feel, some say, high, energized and giggly and all those things. There's other cannabinoids like CBD, which is very popular these days. Everybody thinks that CBD alone is going to cure the world, which unfortunately it won't. It's a beautiful, wonderful substance. It's one cannabinoid, there's CBN, which is a different cannabinoid, one that helps you a lot with sleep. And the list is long. Basically, a cannabis plant contains more than 60 active components, different cannabinoids: THC, CBD, CBN, THCA, and I could go on, that all have medical properties when it responds to your body. And then we also have another concept when we're talking about medical cannabis called the entourage effect, where we are seeing how the brain and our body is responding disproportionately to small substances of various cannabinoids when it's combined with other cannabinoids. CBD alone is not as effective as if you put THC and CBD together, for example. THC works as a booster for the CBD cannabinoid, while the CBD cannabinoid works as a suppressant to the THC high. It's also why, the idea of, I am personally against the very low or no to THC, CBD creams and oils, because I do not believe it has the same medical properties as if it's a 20-to-1 ratio CBD to THC. That way your body absorbs it better and you get more of the medical properties that you want in the first place. So that being said, the endocannabinoid system runs in our body. It's in all mammals, and it is the only thing that cannabis stimulates. It feeds you. Your endocannabinoid system is waiting, wanting to feed on these different cannabinoids: CBD, THC, so on and so forth. It does not attack your nervous system. It does not give you hallucinations like other some psychedelics do. You're not able to overdose on cannabis because it does not attack your nervous system like other opiates and others do. Alcohol does. So all of this of course comes from science. It's not something I'm coming up with. It is proven science, but it's so recent, and it's from 1990, that people still have some very misconceived ideas about the drugs in the 70s, the reefer madness in the 40s. A lot of propaganda, especially driven by the U.S., that basically ended up with the treaty, the International Convention of 1961, banning cannabis, making it a Schedule 4 substance. They put all the drugs, putting them in different schedules. Schedule 1 having some sort of medical proven effect, to Schedule 4 that had absolutely no medical effect. Cannabis.
We're going to go into that, but I want to talk about break a little. But when I see in the United States now, you said, when did the shift happen? Because I remember it was like you combined cannabis with hippies and the flower power movement and so on and so on. But now it's extremely mainstream. Where did the shift that happen? Because
and to understand that, of course, we have to like cannabis did not arrive in the Americas in the 60s, but
it was long before black people and so on.
And it was definitely, it was a counterculture thing. Like America's like war on drugs, of course, really escalated in the 80s with Reagan, President Reagan, really like declaring war on drugs. But the real war on drugs really started already back in the early 1950s, where they basically create laws saying that first-time cannabis offenders can face up to 2 to 10 years of prison time, and going even further back, in 1906 is really when America starts addressing, categorizing and criminalizing various drugs. In 1906 is when they start having to label what kind of substances that they put in medicine. Cannabis has been used in North America and Europe in medicine for hundreds and thousands of years. By 1931, it gets federally criminalized here in the U.S. Harry Anslinger is the leader in the propaganda against cannabis and the legalization thereof, and it really. During Second World War, there's a little bit of a glitch because a lot of the Americans starts growing hemp in order to support the war effort. But as soon as the war is over, they kind of go back to this very harsh stance on cannabis. By 1951, 52, you're facing potentially 10 years in jail for smoking cannabis.
Somebody says that is because of racism, because when black people fight for their rights, then cannabis getting banned and people got into jail.
Definitely. I would say like that really, like a lot of the incarceration of black people and Hispanics definitely was part of it, trying to keep it out of white suburbia, and I think the hippie culture was basically a counterculture, trying to break with old norms, not accepting the rules that was necessarily presenting them, being against the war, and being pro like a substance like cannabis that then flourishes in that community, especially in the 60s, which then translates into by the 1970s, you're having the normal organization here in the U.S., a college-funded like cannabis reform organization, who really starts to spread the word of legalization and decriminalization in college in college areas and the likes. But definitely, the cannabis has always been, in America, cannabis is still referred to on the federal level as marijuana, which is really it's a racial slur that stems from the fact that especially the Mexicans, Hispanics migrating from Mexico after their independence in 1910, and the war for independence, they brought cannabis, and they tried to make it federally legal very early on, but failed because there was also multiple states where it wasn't that much of an issue as it was in southern states. but California is one of the first states that makes their own laws for criminalizing and penalizing people for cultivation and cannabis consumption, and especially selling cannabis without proper permissions, not paying taxes, and all from selling cannabis is something that gets struck down hard, basically. And it's very difficult to grow and cultivate cannabis if you can't sell it to anybody. So that's definitely been it. I think what we're experiencing now is more, a consequence, especially from the administration in the 80s and early 90s, where they basically used, cannabis as an excuse to go into to disenfranchised communities and make a lot of arrests in primarily the Black and Latino communities. And if anybody is curious, all studies shows that white people, Black people, Hispanic people, they all smoke cannabis at the same rate. It is equally popular among all the ethnicities. Yet, Black people are more than 3 times likely, and sometimes, in some cases, 5-10 times more likely to get arrested for cannabis possession, sales, or cultivation.
Yeah, I can see that in Norway too. But we are on the social ladder, because I've done cannabis in my youth. I was never caught, because I grew up in a good area. My father was a doctor and so on. But I know people who do in some areas in my city was always caught by for it. So I'm never been charged with anything. It's like that, because I think every society there's so much drug use, but we try to pretend it doesn't exist when it does exist at all the time. So I think the racist slur is there, but why this hardcore laws? Because cannabis was used for a lot of different things. They were even trying to commercialize it that cannabis was a good thing for you, and then the pharmaceutical industry try to stop it totally. But also Rockefeller, who does oil companies, also try to stop it totally. What is sudden ban is
Yeah, there's definitely some elements of big pharma, of the medical industry, like, of course, having an interest in taking away like a substance that is so easily grown by anybody, and they can grow their own medicine. That being said, I think in reality, what really started this trend, and definitely big pharma pushed along with that agenda, but all of this also really, it kind of culminated with the First World War. A lot of women getting addicted to opiates, a lot of soldiers coming back with morphine addictions and all those things. The Americans kind of decided at that point that they wanted to kind of strike down real hard on all kind of substance abuse. They had a prohibition of alcohol for a period of time. They basically, like, at that point, tried to take it all away from people and make them live the pure Puritan life, and had some success with it. I would say cannabis was a little bit swept under the rug, like, as part of it, in that fashion too. But naturally, like, cannabis has always been very, very easy to cultivate. It's been very, very easy to consume. It does have a lot of medical effects. In more modern times, you can get synthesized cannabinoids created by big pharma that is completely legal. They have created synthetic like substances that's very, very close to the same kind of properties as is in the cannabis sativa plant. So there's definitely been some pushback on that. I think it was also just driven from a very Puritan point of view, with the federal government that just wanted to, stay the pure American way, get rid of communism, get rid of reefer from the jazz musicians, and all those kind of things. And of course that was then also what ended up being what caused a counterculture like the hippie movement in the 60s, because it just became too much with trying to suppress people and trying to take their rights away and tell people how to live and do, basically. Big Pharma is, of course, a giant player. Another corporate, and I think a lot of people maybe don't see that completely, but I personally think that the private prison system in America is at least as responsible for where we are right now than any for pharmaceutical companies. In America, you're having private companies who has prisons who would like every cell to be full. By having really stringent laws and very harsh sentencing for very low level offenses, minimum sentencing of 10, 20, many years in prison. Somebody is unfortunately in the American model making money in that situation. Thankfully, that's not completely how it is back in Scandinavia, but that is definitely a big factor as well, that we have had some people who has had a very big interest in finding more customers and bracket for their business that happens to be jail. So I think that is something that I think people are starting to become aware of. Here in Colorado, the governor has issued an order basically making private prisons illegal, and more states are doing the same, trying to take this element of justice, these opponents of justice reform out of the equation, because they have a lot of money, they have a lot of influence, and unfortunately are often able to keep these archaic laws still on the books.
But I can see the both sides of the aisle here. Both Democrats and Republicans are it'll be the same way, because Biden and Al Gore and Clinton, they incarcerated a lot of people during the 90s. They're going to be as tough as the right was. Where was the left? Were there any people on the left or the right who had anything to say against this? Because it was, I saw a documentary like Jimmy Carter was on board on legalization in the end of the 70s, and suddenly this just switched on both sides. What happened?
Americans don't like when I tell them this, but I think as a Scandinavian person, especially, one has to understand that the Democratic, the Republican two-party system in the United States is not. It's not even close to fascism versus communism. It is a central liberal versus more conservative central leaning. Like, they are extremely close to each other, like ideologically. The best example is Americans like their guns and their weapons, and we just had another school shooting here in Colorado where I'm at. A guy went into a King Soopers and shot 10 people, and unfortunately that's just become almost the norm in the American society. Yeah. The Democrats now is in charge of the press, like they have the White House with Biden. They have the majority in both the Senate and the House of Representatives, which basically means that they can enact any law that they want to, but still they are unable to find a majority to enact these more harsh gun like these more restrictive measures to try to take assault weapons out of the hands of kids and stuff like that. So that being said, Republicans and Democrats have more things in common than they don't. And I think that is also what you will see: Republicans who's pro cannabis, and you will sadly also see Democrats against cannabis, and it's like that in a lot of it's a lot of, I don't know, how many parties do you guys have in Norway? I'm not even sure right now, but we probably have plus 10.
We have 7 or 8 in the parliament, but it can be
Uh-huh.
some rotation now because somebody is falling out and ones are coming in. So it's going to be a strange election in September. And one of the parties who's for legalization of cannabis is coming big in.
I hope they will. Anybody who would, because that's where it starts. If we don't have politicians who understands the plant and what it does,
Yeah.
then 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 nothing happens, right? Right? Like if you keep electing the same politicians who's been there for years, who has these old out of date ideas about what cannabis is, what it does, what it can do, all those things. It is really important that people start by electing politicians who have the same framework as like the same way of thinking about that topic as themselves, for sure.
I'm a politician myself, and I'm fucking tired of fucking excusing myself. Like, are you for that? Yes, I'm fucking for that. Do you want people to smoke cannabis? If they want to, they can smoke it as much as they want. Easy fucking peasy, I would say. Because you have a debate in Norway, you cannot say certain things. And when you put like cannabis on in the party program, like we have to evaluate the laws and discuss the process. Fuck that. We know the facts right now. Now we have to go how we're going to legalization it, how we're going to distribute it, and how we're going to sell it, and so on and so on. Debate where it should be legal or not be legal. Yeah, it's time to take a stand. The science is in. That's how I can say about
I
my
think
point of view.
yeah, ignorance is bliss, and I think a lot of people would like it to be true that what they have believed in for a lot of years isn't in fact truth, but it's not. And I would say to you and to anybody in Norway or across the globe, if anybody's interested in seeing how it actually works
Yeah,
and how it really is, Colorado is a flight away. We're here. We're happy to show anybody who's interested in seeing what it's all about to come on by. I will promise you that if it, like that if you can come here and see it with your own eyes and feel it and hear it and understand that this is actually a good thing for society. Like because some people can't they can't visualize the future. They have to feel and see. But the future is right over
yeah.
here, and we have the pleasure of meeting delegations from around the world from time to time. And of course, that's our part in all of this, is trying to give people a good example to point to. Don't believe everything you read. Come
Yeah.
over here and see what it's all about.
I would love to come and visit your business. So
You consider it an open invite. We have activities pretty much across the nation at this point. Colorado is home. I believe that it is the most advanced market. California was much earlier, but California have had a lot of problems with really regulating it properly.
yeah,
The Colorado model really works. And for anybody who's curious about my stance about home growing, I actually do think that people should be allowed to grow their own
yeah,
cannabis. I think that there is no reasonable sentiment to not allow people to grow 6, 8 plants at home. Do we have to have some sort of cap on? Absolutely, because
yeah,
or else we start creating hubs for illegal trades, out of country, minor sales, all those kind of things that we definitely don't want. But of course, it is a human right, just like I want to be able to grow my tomatoes. I don't personally like tomatoes. I think those things should be banned. But I also do think that people should have the like that. That's my evil side. But my righteous side tells me that even though I despise tomatoes, I would never eat
yeah,
one. You should have the right to grow your own tomatoes as well, John. Why not? And just
well,
like I want to be allowed to grow my weed, you can grow your tomatoes, and we'll all get what we want. So that's kind of like my stance on it. I know, I'm part of the industry, and I'm starting to be like an old old timer, and the big publicly traded companies are definitely out there trying to lobby uh, for, 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 for for making it illegal to do home cultivation. We saw it in Illinois. We're seeing it a bunch of new states where they unfortunately are not allowing people to grow at home. I believe that's a sin, and I think that people should be allowed to cultivate a plant that will not kill them ever, as they want, just like with tomatoes.
But how do you want to regulate it? Because we come from you come from Denmark. You have a regulation of alcohol. I know it's very liberal. You can buy alcohol at 7-Eleven and so on. I'm from Norway, where we have like wine. You have on-state shops and so on, and you can have the strongest beer you can have in a shop is 4.7% and so on. How do you see? But I also see a lot of things in the United States, like they're making cannabis into candy and so on and so on. How do you ideal regulations? Because I don't necessarily want young people to use alcohol or any substance really when they're too young to.
I really
so how
don't.
do you want to regulate it?
Yeah, sure. Like, and again, I think, maybe I'm a little biased because I've been part of creating this industry for the last 6 years or whatever. But I really do believe that the model that we have created here in Colorado is fairly legit. We're having stores that sells nothing but cannabis. If you're a recreational consumer, there's purchase limits. You have to be 21 first of all. There's still laws against giving cannabis to minors, smoking around children, and all those kind of things. It's when you put it into when you regulate it that you're and of course I don't know exactly what would work for Norway. I don't. If you guys can adopt a model that you feel is comfortable with alcohol, why not make a similar model for cannabis, having like we have in America, special dispensaries. Only adults are allowed. Everybody has to get IDs. All the products are tested. They're labeled with their potency, and everybody knows exactly what they're getting. And an edible, like there's a rule in Colorado. It's pretty much across the board now in the U.S. But an edible chocolate bar with cannabis in is allowed to have a maximum of 100 milligrams of THC. And normally you would say a newbie would probably, and they will be instructed by that by professionals in the store, just if you're buying a good wine or anything like that. Will be instructed to try half a piece, maybe 5 milligrams, see how it feels in your system after half an hour, 45 minutes. If you want a little more, like take a little more. Like so educating people at this point of sales, teaching them to have a good experience with it, not to overconsume, not to give it to kids. All products in Colorado, excuse me, all products in Colorado is sold in child-proof containers, just like as if medicine would be. You're not allowed to advertise to anything that would you're not allowed to use cartoon animals in any kind of marketing. You're not allowed to use it in your packaging or anything like that might appeal to kids. With the gummies, they now have to have the actual wording THC written on it, just so nobody can ever be in doubt whether or not it's actually a infused gummy or not. There's also other states that have simply decided, nope, we don't want to legalize edibles because we think that is too tempting. Look, right now we're starting to take the first steps at Mexico. Mexico is going to be the third country to legalize. The law that's presented in Mexico right now that will be overseen and implemented by it's the Agency for Drug Abuse, basically. But they are basically saying that they don't want to start with edibles. They don't. Okay. They want to roll it out with cannabis flower, cannabis concentrates, but they want to hold back to see how that goes before they want to let loose on edibles. There's a lot of ways to do it. And if you're an adult, you can probably also figure out to make your own edibles using activated distillate. because it'll be pretty much the same. So that being said, just because it's not possible to get an edible in store, you can still get the oil. You can buy a piece of pastry, and you can make your own edible right in the kitchen if that's what you want to do. But the idea of selling it and marketing as an edible, some people, some markets don't like that, and that's why they don't want to allow it in the first place.
But can it be commercial? Because the big pharma, they can do commercial about their medicine. Can you use commercial about your medicine?
But like I would say so. Like all cannabis in Colorado and in other states, all legalized cannabis is subdued to a lot of regulation, testing, sanitary requirements, all these things being inspected, just like as if you were a medical establishment. All of products gets tested for contaminants, for mold, for potency, so people know how strong is the product that they are. So the product that you're getting now is definitely of a commercial or quality. Absolutely, it's
you cannot put commercials on television like.
So they just no, and that is really stems. A lot of that is also because television sometimes get federal grants and stuff like that. Anything that gets money from the federal government is not allowed to play with cannabis because we're not federally legal. We're only legal in states.
Yes, that's funny because the FBI can come down on you, can they? They can stop dispensaries and so on in Colorado.
If they so chose. What happened was, in 1996 is when California is really the first state to kind of go against the stream. They are having a rampant problem with the HIV epidemic, and other ailments, cancer and stuff. And 1996 is when they decide to say, okay, we don't care what the federal government is saying. We're going to make this legal because we believe it will help our constituents and our residents. But it's really only until 2009 where President Barack Obama comes out and officially states that the federal government is not gonna prioritize cannabis entities in states where they're doing it legally, basically. So at that time it kind of flourished both in state here in Colorado and across the nation. What has happened, because you're asking, can they come knock on our doors? No, they can't. And that's the wonderful thing, because our politicians in the Capitol in Washington, D.C. has made I don't really remember who's the sponsors on it right now, but in essence, in the federal budget, they have written in saying that the federal government is allowed to spend exactly $0 on prosecuting cannabis entities in states where they're doing it legally. So while they do have the authority to come and do it, they don't have any resources to come do it. And that's kind of how they have been able to tie it up a little bit and give people a little more security, knowing that they're not allowed to spend a dime on it, basically, and that's why they'll be staying away.
But how is going to move on now? Because I say Biden is holding a little bit back. Kamala Harris has been very on it, and some leading Democrats in the Congress has also been very on it. They want to move forward without Biden. So where is it going right now?
So right now we're having Majority Leader Chuck Schumer in the Senate, and we're having Cory Booker especially trying to put together, and they're working very closely with several advocacy groups in the industry. America, I think a lot of people have a misconstrued idea about the power of the president. He has the ability to veto laws, but that's really about it. And he has the ability to present laws for the House and the Senate to vote on. As long as Biden does not veto the bill, which I have no there's nothing that indicates just because he's not necessarily the one who wants to champion the cause. I don't think anybody has expressed that he's thinking of vetoing any bills that's going to be put in front of him.
Because there must be a lot of Republicans also on this, I would guess.
There is, a guy like Rand Paul. He's not an gentleman that I'm necessarily super aligned with in many issues, but he has been a big proponent of cannabis. Despite what we might feel about the former President Trump, he also had a very notorious advisor called Roger Stone, who is also a big he's first of all a big figure in the Republican section, but also extremely cannabis friendly. And it has definitely become a bipartial issue where people on both sides of the aisle, especially federally, maybe on the local level, we're seeing a little more Republican against Democrats for. But on the federal level, there is more and more. There's more and more politicians who's getting behind it. How it also works, and just so everybody understands, the reason why we're so excited now, and we weren't that excited last year when it comes to real federal reform, is that before the November election, or actually in the January election in Georgia, the Republicans were having the majority in the Senate. And when you have the majority in the Senate, the majority leader is the gentleman or gentle lady who is able to present bills. They decide what gets voted on. For the longest of time, Mitch McConnell was the Senate majority leader, and Mitch McConnell did not want to touch any of the many bills that was presented coming from especially the House of Representatives for them to vote on. So while there has been across the aisle for many years, actually, now we're looking at plus 70%, almost 70% approval rating in the U.S. Like basically, people agree more on legalizing cannabis than abortion rights and all kind of other things across the board, Republican and Democrat. But because there was one gentleman in particular, Mitch McConnell, representing the Republican Party, just haven't had any movement on it, and hopefully that's going to change now that Chuck Schumer has taken the lead on it. Right?
It's funny how one person can stop something to be getting voted on at all. That must be extremely strange. But okay.
As a Scandinavian person, coming to America, one thing you realize is, first of all, it's a huge country. It's a really, really big country. And then I think you also start realizing that the federal government is kind of its own strange entity. Most of what happens in America is really mostly determined on a state level. It is really very close to the EU, where you're having some framework but where everybody kind of does their own thing. So yeah, the federal government is a beast of its own. We're part of NCIA, the National Cannabis Industry Association, and other industry advocacy groups in Washington to kind of keep them to the fire, and we have been very successful, also because this is what people want. So there is thankfully also more and more politicians locally, state, and on the federal level who is starting to understand and pro cannabis. I myself helped in the campaign for our current governor here in Colorado. He ran basically on wanting to be pro-cannabis, pro-industry, pro-consumers, all those good things. So having people commit to really legalizing, I think it's also really shown, and that's for you, Trent. I hope you're gonna win whatever you're running for, but also for other politicians. I think. I think it's the stigma that associating yourself with legalized cannabis is going to hurt you at the ballot boxes. I think especially in 2020 and 2018, we really saw the people who came out and said, I am pro-legalization. This is something that is dear and important to me. the people responded very well to that, and that was not the kind of lashback that a lot of people had maybe suspected, even if they were Republicans. I know many wonderful Republicans who was pro cannabis, who's pro small business, who just don't want the government to interfere too much in their business. Just like I know a lot of wonderful Democrats who also just want to make sure that there is some sort of, framework for people, some sort of safety net, and some sort of social services and all those kind of things. But in all, Americans agree a whole lot more on things than that what divides them. That's probably my experience after 10 years being here, living with them.
I think it's the same thing we have both in Europe and Scandinavia and United States is like, are you going to use police and incarceration on people who are not hurting anybody else? That is my main goal on it, because there are trafficking in the United States and the rest of the world. There are slavery. It's violence, and we are fucking stopping people from smoking a plant. That's a lot of my do, and I don't really give a shit if people don't like me. I just stand for what's right.
First of all, you need to,
there's more and more people coming. I started this in the 90s, and now people are like, holy shit, Ron, you're still on it? Yes, I fucking am.
It becomes a passion, right? And also when you start realizing that there is literally nothing but evidence that supports a full legalization instead of all these hindrances and people being incarcerated, people having their lives ruined, people not getting access to their medicine and all those things. That being said, America is going the right way. But when we look, and that's also when we're talking about incarcerations, there is unfortunately to this day right now more people in jail in the United States for cannabis consumption where they have hurt nobody than all people arrested for any drug offenses in the 80s. So while 17 states have now legalized recreational cannabis, there is unfortunately still to this day right now people who's having their lives ruined, people who's getting life sentences for really doing nothing else but moving cannabis from one place to another, trying to make some money or provide some patients with their medicine and stuff like that. But you're right, it is where is the victim? It is a victimless crime. As a society, I think we have already determined really that we cannot prosecute people for anything where there is no injured party. And the only thing that I can think of in my mind is that the only thing that we can say is an injured party is that the government is not getting their fair share of tax revenue. And that's why I'm saying, okay.
And you're using tax money on people in. That's what you're doing. A lot of it too.
So much, it's a $1 billion industry already. A country, like Norway, we're 5.5 million people here in Colorado. We're kind of spread the same way as Norway. We're a little big. There's a lot of mountains. There's the valleys and stuff. You have to drive 35 to get to one and to another. But potentially there's at least a couple of a billion Norwegian crowns laying in it for you, waiting to be used to all kind of things. Plus the reducing costs for jails, the reduction in costs for police enforcement, the legal system, the courts, all those kind of things. That is all expenses that society carries as a consequence to this misplaced desire to regulate a substance that is really I would almost call it harmless for a fully developed brain. I would say though, if there is anybody listening out there who is who thinks about being too young and smoking cannabis definitely has shown that you should not start consuming it too early. It's something to do with the fact that cannabis helps you regulate stress. That's one of the main things that cannabis does. It helps you regulate physical and mental stress. So you're getting a little more like borderline in your immune system. You don't get eczema, seizures, all those kind of things. Really comes from this sense of stabilizing your immune system and your auto response. But young people, while your brain is still developing, it's not a good idea to smoke cannabis. It has been shown that it can lead to people having issues with anxiety, with other developmental like issues, and really. Of course, on a medical perspective, tinctures and all those things with very little cannabis, even babies can use that, but using it recreationally, you really should be minimum 16. I know the law says 18, and that's probably best to wait. But we really should not encourage anybody under the age of 16 to start smoking cannabis on a regular basis. That is truly harmful to them. Once you're an adult, once your brain has formalized 18, 21 fully, you can smoke cannabis, it's gonna be okay, and there won't be the same kind of long-term effects that there might be if you start a little too young. So that's really that's also science. It's important to distinguish those things because it is harmful for kids. It's not harmful for you and me. Assuming you're more than 21, right?
I read an article that like more and more elder people and women are coming on board on this issue.
I think like the women, like a lot of it has to do with stigma, but I think women are also more inclined to try.
But also the women pains a lot have been good on using cannabis, I heard.
And it works amazingly. Like for again, going back to how it kind of helps you regulate your system. Your pain response is not as bad, and all those kind of things. Definitely, I think women as a whole is also just a little more inclined to experiment when it comes to supplements and all those kind of things. I know I'm not super great at looking out for my health, and I think my girlfriend is way better at it than I am. So that's one thing. I think another interesting part when it comes to old people is, of course, now we figure out that this all stems from the cannabinoid system in our brain and our body. What we have also learned is that it seems like our endocannabinoid system keeps developing throughout our lives, which means that maybe one of the reasons why the kids from the 60s are now smoking some reefer and they're like, oh, this is way wilder. It might actually be because their endocannabinoid system has been refined over age and they're able to absorb more of the cannabinoid that they're getting through it. Basically, they're getting high as fuck because they're getting up in age. And I can't wait. If it's this great at this age, I can only imagine how it's gonna be when I'm up there. So that's another thing. And of course, and that is more of that's a general thing. I think that's what Norwegians will also experience once you get there. In America, it is federally illegal. I don't think it's as common in Norway, but it is extremely common in America to be drug tested for work. The seniors are out of the market. They do not need to be drug tested any longer. They can do it without any concerns. A lot of them have experienced the downsides of opiates, too many painkillers, arthritis, whatever it might be that ails them. And a lot of them seek some sort of alternative treatment. And I think that's why they also come to cannabis, because objectively, the product sells itself. I don't have to boost it too much, but of course these people tell me and that they feel better about themselves, less pain, better well-being, and much less side effects. It's mostly the side effects from conventional opioids and pain medication that really makes people, and of course, that the side effects includes addiction. You get addicted to painkillers, that they don't feel when they're doing cannabis, and where they feel more in control over their pain management or alleviation. It is also really good for again, regulating your immune system. Arthritis, is a something that people of age fight more with. It is really your immune system fighting because there is a little bit of a problem in the joint. CBD, THC combination can help, lower inflammation in joints and stuff like that. So where conventional opioids really work more as a pain blocker, I think old people has realized that cannabis kind of does the same, but it also actually helps cure the ailment, or at least lower the inflammation or whatever, which painkillers won't. They will just make you not feel it, basically.
And we let that be the last statement in this podcast. we can go on for hours because this is a good subject.
I hope we can, and you'll come over here soon, and then I'll give you the grand tour. Thank you very much for spending time with me, Tron. It's a pleasure. Please keep doing what you do over there, and if anybody's out there in the big world wanting to know more about cannabis, reach out to Trond and me. We're here to help.
Put down your questions the segment below, and or mail them to me, and I'm gonna give it everything. This was Tim Bruus Morgen, my Dane from Denmark, now United States citizen. This was at Tveiten Productions, JointPod number 9, and I hope to see you soon.